Hi, I'm Nick Bolton, the founder of Animas Centre for Coaching. This is the first in a series of videos in which I'll introduce you to the 12 principles that sit at the heart of the philosophy and practice of transformative coaching at Animas. Now, before we go any further, it's worth saying that these 12 principles are not fixed commandments carved in stone, nor are they some form of industry standard. They are also not models or tools or techniques or any kind of framework that you use on a client. Rather, they're what we believe to be essential stances, ways of being and ways of seeing that are always present in some form whenever coaching becomes genuinely transformative. Now, when I say 12 principles, it's easy to imagine 12 distinct pillars, each governing a certain behavior. But that's not how this works. Instead, they overlap and they weave together to create what we might think of as a transformative field. Now, some of them are clearly distinct, but others sit very close together, and they only really reveal their differences when you look carefully. So in this video, I'll begin by naming the 12 principles, and then we'll explore some of the nuances, where they overlap, where they differ, and how they interact, so you get a better sense of how they sit together. So let's start by going through the 12, but in future videos, I will unpack each of them one by one. So first we have the Unknowing Principle, which says that we approach coaching without any assumption that we understand what's going on and a willingness to bracket what we think we know. Then we have the Humanistic Principle, which asks us to see the client as inherently resourceful, capable, and oriented towards their own growth. Then we have the Phenomenological Principle, which positions the client's lived experience, rather than our interpretation of it, as central to the coaching. Then we have the Relational Principle, which recognizes the importance of the coaching relationship, both as the foundation for the work, but also as potentially something which informs the work itself. Then we have the Dialogic Principle, which ensures that coaching is not just a process, but that meaning and insight emerge through conversation rather than some kind of formula. Then we have the Emergent Principle, which ensures that we value the organic and unfolding nature of coaching rather than being attached to what's gone before or something that we think we have to move towards. Then we have the Collaborative Principle, which treats coaching as a co-created endeavor with ongoing partnering and micro-contracting around how the coach and client work together. Then we have the Paradigmatic Principle, which asks us to consider the client's worldview, the assumptions and the mental models that shape how clients see themselves and the world. Then we have the Holistic Principle, which asks us to attend to the whole person, the mind, body, emotion and spirit of the person as an integrated inner system. Then we have the Systemic Principle, which ensures we see the client as embedded within a wider external system, families, organizations, cultures, societies and more. Then we have the Integrative Principle, which encourages us to draw on multiple theories and traditions in a flexible way rather than being bound by a single school of thought. Finally, we have the Pragmatic Principle, which ensures that insight translates into lived reality, into experiments, choices, and actions in the real world. So that's the landscape of the 12 principles in brief. All are interrelated and all contributing something different. But, and this is so important, they're not 12 totally separate things. Some of them cluster very closely together, and some look almost identical at first glance. Let's take the relational, the collaborative, and the dialogic principles. At first glance, they can look remarkably similar. All of them are concerned with the relationship, the conversation, and the experience between the coach and the client, but each points to a subtly different dimension of that transformative work. The relational principle is about the living relationship itself, not simply as the foundation of coaching, but as a legitimate and useful subject of exploration. It invites us to ask, what is happening between us right now? What is being evoked in this space that might relate to the wider issues? The relationship becomes a kind of mirror to the client's relational patterns outside of the coaching, a microcosm of their wider life. What shows up in here, in this moment, is not necessarily an aside, it's data, insight, and material for transformation. Now, the collaborative principle, meanwhile, is not about the relationship per se, but about the process, the coaching process. It's the constant ongoing partnering and micro-contracting that ensures the coaching remains a co-created endeavor. It asks, how shall we work with what's appearing right now? What direction feels alive for us? What pace feels right? It's the shared authorship and creation of the journey, moment by moment, ensuring the client is an active participant, not a passive recipient. And then we have the dialogic principle, which looks not at the relationship and not at the process, but at the emergence of meaning. Dialogue is the recognition that the insight is not something that the coach gives, nor is it something the client already has. It arises between us, in the back and forth of language, reflection, presence, and meaning making. The dialogic principle says that transformation unfolds through conversation, not through the execution of a method or a model. So while these principles sit closely together, relational, collaborative and dialogic, each illuminates a different facet of the coaching encounter. They sit near one another, but they do different jobs. Now again, consider the phenomenological and the unknowing principles. They can look very similar. Both invite the coach to drop assumptions. Both ask us to stay open. Both encourage a stance of curiosity. But their orientations differ. The phenomenological principle is about entering the client's lived experience without imposing our interpretation, our assumptions. It asks us to see the client's world as they experience it. The unknowing principle, on the other hand, is about the coach's internal stance, the deliberate releasing of expertise, of certainty, and the temptation to understand too quickly. It asks us to stay open, not just to the client's experience, but to the unfolding of everything that happens in the coaching. Then we have the holistic and the systemic principles. These two are deeply connected, and yet they focus on different directions. The systemic principle looks outward at the wider systems of culture, family, organizations, and society that shape how the client experiences themselves. The holistic principle looks inward at the internal landscape of mind, body, emotion, and spirit that forms the client's inner world. But the two are inseparable. The internal world is shaped by the external one, and the external world is interpreted through the internal one. The systemic lens contextualizes the person. The holistic lens honors their inner wholeness. Two perspectives, one human being. Some principles, though, stand out as more clearly distinct, even while they remain part of the wider tapestry. The Integrative Principle, for example, speaks to our breadth as coaches. It reminds us that we're not confined to a single model or tradition, but can draw from a wide range of psychological and philosophical influences when they genuinely serve the client. And the Pragmatic Principle is equally clear. It's about how we move from insight to some form of action, the lived experience, how a shift in awareness becomes a shift in choice, embodiment, and action. Even here, of course, we might draw on the phenomenological lens to explore a client's inner sense of readiness or resonance. So while these principles are distinct, they're never isolated. Even the ones that seem most self-contained still sit within and are enriched by the wider ecosystem of transformative coaching principles. And so when we talk about the 12 principles then, we're not talking about 12 boxes to be memorized. We're talking about a constellation, a set of interconnected orientations that together create the conditions for transformative work to take place. Some overlap, some contrast, some reinforce one another, some push and pull in different ways. But each principle adds a thread to the whole tapestry of transformative coaching, making it a much richer, more spacious, more human way of working. Transformative coaching isn't built on a single method or a single model. It's built on a way of being and a way of seeing. And these principles help us articulate what those ways of being and seeing truly look like. In the 12 videos that follow, we'll explore each of the principles in more detail so you can get a much better sense of how they operate, how they differ, and how they support one another. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.